Have you ever wondered who the very first Americans were? When did they arrive? Where did they come from? Scientists have been asking these questions for hundreds of years. But now, something incredible has been found in Oregon, something that changes everything we thought we knew. A discovery so old, so shocking, that it pushes back human history in America by thousands of years. What they found will blow your mind. Deep in the high desert of Oregon, there's a place called Rimrock Draw. It's a rocky shelter carved into the side of a cliff. But this is not just any cave. This place holds secrets that are almost 20,000 years old. The evidence found here makes it the oldest place where humans lived in North America, older than any other site we've ever discovered. And what scientists found inside changed history forever. The story starts in 2009. An archaeologist named Scott Thomas was driving supplies to another dig site. He wasn't even looking for anything special. But then he saw something strange, a row of rocks sticking up through the sagebrush. And underneath, tall grass, really tall grass. That's when he knew something was hidden there. You see, tall grass means deep dirt, and deep dirt means old stuff buried underneath. Scott found some stone spearheads on the surface. They were about 8,000 years old. Cool, right? But he had no idea what was waiting deeper down. In 2011, a team from the University of Oregon started digging. A scientist named Dr. Patrick O'Grady led the team. They set up their tools, they marked their grids, they started digging carefully, inch by inch. The shelter wasn't huge, just about 10 feet deep and 65 feet long, but it had something special. A stream once ran right next to it, water and shelter. The perfect camp for ancient people. But how old were these people? Nobody knew yet. For a long time, everyone believed the same story. The first Americans were called the Clovis people. They came here about 13,000 years ago. Scientists thought they walked from Asia to America. There was a land bridge connecting the two continents. It was called Beringia, and here's how they thought it worked. Huge sheets of ice covered most of North America, but between these ice sheets was a corridor, a pathway. The Clovis people supposedly walked through this ice-free corridor and spread across America. That was the story everyone believed. But there was one big problem. New studies showed something shocking. That ice corridor, it didn't open until 12,000 years ago, and even when it opened, nothing lived there. No plants, no animals, nothing to eat. It was a frozen wasteland. So how could the Clovis people have used it? They couldn't have. The whole theory was wrong. Then other sites started popping up. First, scientists found Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pennsylvania. It had tools and fire pits that were 16,000 years old. Wait, what? That's 3,000 years before Clovis. Then came Cooper's Ferry in Idaho, also 16,000 years old. These discoveries prove something important. People were here before the ice corridor opened. So how did they get here? Scientists came up with a new idea. They traveled by boat along the Pacific coast. This is called the kelp highway theory. The coast was full of food, seals, fish, shellfish, kelp forests. Ancient people could paddle their boats down the coast, eating as they went. It made perfect sense. But Rimrock Draw was about to shock everyone even more. In 2012, the team was digging deep, really deep, about 8 feet down into the ground. And then they found it, pieces of a tooth. And not just any tooth, a camel tooth. Now, you might be thinking, camels? In Oregon? That's crazy. But here's the thing. Camels actually came from North America originally. Millions of years ago, they evolved here. Then they spread to Asia and Africa. But in America, they went extinct about 13,000 years ago. These weren't small camels either. They were massive. Scientists call them Camelops hesternus. Picture this, 7 feet tall at the shoulder, nearly 2,000 pounds. That's bigger than any camel alive today. They could run 40 miles per hour. These were giants. And the ancient people of Rimrock Draw hunted them. But how do we know that? The camel bones had cut marks on them. Tool marks. Human beings butchered this camel. This wasn't an animal that died naturally and rolled into a cave. This was dinner. Someone killed it. Someone cut it up. Someone ate it. But wait, it gets even crazier. The camel tooth was found under a layer of ash, volcanic ash. And this is where the story gets wild. In archaeology, volcanic ash is like a timestamp from nature. Every volcano has a unique chemical signature, like a fingerprint. Scientists can test the ash and figure out exactly which volcano it came from and when it erupted. This ash, it came from Mount St. Helens, not the famous 1980 eruption. This was much, much older. It happened 15,600 years ago. The ash buried everything. It sealed the camel tooth like a time capsule. Here's what that means. If the ash is 15,600 years old, then anything underneath it must be even older. The camel tooth had to be older than 15,600 years. But how much older? Scientists needed to date it exactly. They used a technique called radiocarbon dating. They tested the enamel of the camel tooth. The results came back, and everyone was stunned. The tooth was 18,250 years old. Let me say that again. 18,250 years old. That's more than 5,000 years older than the Clovis people. This changed everything. Now, scientists don't say years ago. They say years before present, or BP. Why? Because they use the year 1950 as their starting point. That's when radiocarbon dating was invented. It's also when nuclear bombs started messing up carbon levels in the atmosphere. So when scientists say 18,250 BP, they mean 18,250 years before 1950. Just so you know the science behind it. But the camel tooth wasn't the only thing they found. The team also discovered stone tools. Beautiful tools made from orange agate. And these tools are special for three big reasons. First, agate is an amazing material. It breaks like glass. That means you can make edges sharper than a razor blade. Ancient people loved using it. Second, this particular orange agate, it doesn't exist anywhere near Rimrock Draw. The closest sources are over 100 miles away. That means these ancient people traveled huge distances to get the right stone. Or they traded with other groups. Either way, these people were smart and organized. The tools themselves were scrapers. Think of them like ancient Swiss Army knives, multiple cutting edges on one tool. And here's where it gets insane. Scientists tested one of these scrapers for residue. They were looking for ancient proteins, and they found blood. Not just any blood, bison blood, from an extinct species of bison. You might be wondering, how does blood survive for 18,000 years? Great question. The blood proteins get trapped in tiny cracks in the stone, protected from bacteria and sunlight, almost like a fossil. This is the smoking gun. It proves these tools were used to butcher large animals. The ancient bison were even bigger than modern buffalo, up to 5 feet tall and 3,500 pounds, with horns 3 feet across. Then they found another scraper. This one was buried even deeper in the ash, which means it's even older than the camel tooth. The team also found 68 stone spearheads, different styles, different time periods. Some were 7,000 years old, some were 13,000 years old. But the deepest ones, those were the oldest. And there's more. They found tiny blade fragments, cores where stone was chipped away, even waste flakes for making tools. This wasn't just a quick stop. People lived here for a long time. They made tools here. They fixed broken weapons here. This was home. But perhaps the creepiest discovery? Human hair. Not 1 or 2 strands, at least 29 samples, from at least 3 different people. The hair was preserved in clay. The ends were natural, not cut. These people had never seen metal scissors. Just imagine holding a piece of hair from someone who lived 18,000 years ago. Mind-blowing. Let's talk about the world these people lived in. It was full of monsters, not just camels and bison. The Oregon desert was packed with megafauna, huge animals that are now extinct. There were Colombian mammoths, 13 feet tall and 10 tons. Imagine an elephant but bigger. There were mastodons browsing in wetland forests, giant ground sloths, dire wolves, and the most terrifying predator of all, the short-faced bear. This thing stood 11 feet tall on its hind legs. It could run faster than a horse. If you saw one, you were probably dead. There were also saber-toothed cats, multiple species of ancient horses, and herds of those giant bison. For the people at Rimrock Draw, these animals were everything: food, clothing, tools, but also danger. Hunting a 2,000-pound camel with stone-tipped spears? That took serious courage and skill. Now picture the environment. This was the last glacial maximum, the peak of the Ice Age. Temperatures were 10 degrees Fahrenheit colder than today. The oceans were 400 feet lower. Huge ice sheets covered Canada and parts of the northern United States. But Oregon wasn't covered in ice. Instead, it was cold and wet. The mountains had glaciers. Meltwater created enormous lakes across the desert. Lake Fort Rock was 751 square miles. Lake Shalakan was even bigger and 375 feet deep. The landscape looked totally different. Forests grew at lower elevations, pine trees, spruce, juniper. Animals that today live high in the mountains, back then they lived in the valleys. And right next to Rimrock Draw, a permanent stream, fresh water flowing year-round. For ancient people, this was paradise: shelter, water, and herds of huge animals to hunt. The stream flowed for thousands of years. Eventually, it turned into a marsh. Then, about 7,600 years ago, something catastrophic happened. Mount Mazama exploded. Today we call it Crater Lake. The eruption was massive. Ash covered everything for hundreds of miles. Shortly after, Rimrock Draw was abandoned. The people left and never came back. Here's the key to proving Rimrock Draw is the oldest: stratigraphy. That's the science of rock layers. It's based on a simple rule. In undisturbed ground, the oldest stuff is at the bottom, like a layer cake. The volcanic ash is 15,600 years old. We know that for certain. The camel tooth was found under the ash, so it must be older than 15,600 years. Testing proved it was 18,250 years old. But the tools were found even deeper, below the camel tooth, below everything. That means the tools are even older than 18,250 years. So Rimrock Draw isn't just old, it's the oldest confirmed human site in North America. It beats the Clovis culture by more than 5,000 years. Let that sink in. 5,000 years older. Some scientists think Rimrock Draw might be even older, maybe 20,000 years old, maybe more. Here's why. The date of 18,250 years comes from the camel tooth. But remember, the tools were found deeper than the tooth. The tooth isn't the oldest thing in the shelter. In archaeology, when you date an animal bone instead of dating the tool itself, you're getting a minimum age, a no earlier than marker. If the camel was lying there 18,250 years ago, then the tools buried underneath must have been deposited before that. How much before? We don't know yet. As scientists continue to test more artifacts, especially tools with blood residue, we'll get a clearer picture. But one thing is certain. These people were living in Oregon during the absolute coldest part of the Ice Age, when glaciers were at their thickest, when survival was hardest. And they made it. So how did they live? These people traveled in small groups, maybe 20 to 50 people. They followed animal herds, they gathered plants, they were hunter-gatherers. The rock shelter gave them protection from wind, rain, and sun. They probably hung animal hides from the overhang, maybe built structures inside with wooden poles and sewn skins, making it more comfortable. Their weapons were sophisticated. They used atlatls. That's a spear thrower. It's like a wooden lever that makes your arm longer. You can throw a spear 150 feet at 80 miles per hour. Way better than just throwing with your arm. This let them hunt dangerous animals from a safer distance. They wore clothing made from animal hides, fur parkas, leather leggings, boots. The site has bone needles, which means they sewed their clothes. They had to. Without proper clothing, you'd freeze to death. They also ate a varied diet. Besides meat, they gathered seeds, berries, and roots, juniper seeds, chokecherries, bulrush. They ate whatever they could find. Not everyone believes Rimrock Draw is really that old. Some scientists are skeptical, and they have good reasons. Dr. Donald Grayson from the University of Washington said this: "No one is going to believe this until we're sure the artifacts didn't move downward through the soil." That's a fair concern. Sometimes objects can sink through dirt over thousands of years, freezing and thawing, animals burrowing, tree roots pushing things around. Could the tools have started higher up and worked their way down? The Rimrock Draw team says no. And here's their evidence. They've dated multiple samples: camel teeth, bison teeth, charcoal, sediment. All the dates match up. They found blood from extinct animals on the tools. The volcanic ash layer is intact with no breaks. The orange agate doesn't occur naturally there, proving humans carried it in. The evidence is strong. Dr. O'Grady, who leads the team, admits they need to publish their full research, and they're working on it. A detailed paper was supposed to come out in 2023. As of now, it's still being prepared. But the scientific community is watching closely. So what does Rimrock Draw mean for us? It rewrites American history. For decades, we thought the first Americans arrived 13,000 years ago. We thought they walked through an ice corridor. Both of those ideas are now dead. Instead, people got here at least 18,250 years ago, maybe even 20,000 years ago or more. They probably traveled by boat along the Pacific coast. They were here during the Ice Age. They hunted camels, bison, and horses. They crafted beautiful stone tools. They survived in one of the harshest environments on Earth. And they thrived. Rimrock Draw is more than just an archaeological site. It's a connection to our deepest past. Native American tribes in the region have oral histories about these times. Stories about great floods. Stories about giant animals. And now, science is proving those stories are real. The excavation is finished. The analysis continues. If the dates hold up under peer review, Rimrock Draw will be confirmed as the oldest human settlement in North America. The first Americans weren't who we thought they were. They were older, tougher, and more resourceful than we ever imagined. So the next time you look at a map of America, remember this: long before Columbus, long before the Vikings, even long before the Clovis people, there were others. The first Americans, living in places like Rimrock Draw, hunting giant camels under Ice Age skies. They were here first, and their story is only just beginning to be told. Thanks for watching. If you found this story amazing, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible discoveries from the past. Drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Were humans in America even earlier than 20,000 years ago? Share this video with anyone who loves history. Until next time, keep exploring the past.